welcome to On the Bauble Podcast, episode 18. I'm your host, Subasa J. Ueda, and with me is my co-host, Yuki Lee Bender. And today's episode, we're going to discuss how to build and draft decks with your resource curve in mind. So this is going to be another fundamentals episode where we talk about a new concept we want to bring up, and we're going to call it the resource curve. We didn't really have a name before this episode, and I'm not sure if a name for this concept exists yet. But after you listen to the episode, if you have a better name, you can try putting it in the comments and maybe we can adapt that for the future. But before we go into that, how's your week, Yuki?
My week has been pretty good. I've mostly been taking it easy from Flesh and Blood. I did play the team league, and I think I ended up losing was it a win and in? I guess it was probably a win and in into the playoffs for my team. It was like tied 2-2, then I lost on stream. So that was unfortunate. You can find it on the Team Cup channel. It was a pretty close game. Icelander Mir against Adam Philipchuk from, what's his team? The Combat Chain. So that was a decent game, Icelander Mir. So you can check that out. Other than that, I've just been taking it easy. I've been playing some Across the Obelisk, which is sort of like it's kind of like Slay the Spire. Have you ever played that?
Slay the Spire? I heard of Slay the Spire. It's like a roguelike, right?
Yeah, it's like a roguelike deck building game. So it's pretty fun. And is kind of like a drafting process where you like keep adding cards to your deck, and so it kind of reminds me of draft in some ways as well. The gimmick with this one, I guess, is that it's like a multiplayer. It's like like those old RPGs where you have like parties of like 3 to 4 players. I guess there's still new RPGs like that. It's basically like that though. You have like 3 to 4 characters, you have 4 characters / decks that you can play, and you can play a co-op as well. So I've been trying that out. It's pretty fun. The graphics and stuff aren't fantastic, but the mechanics are pretty cool once you get into it, and you can build some pretty cool decks. So it's been fun.
Okay. Yeah, it's like a little bit hard to get into Flesh and Blood right now because ProQuest season's like, what is that? It's more than a month away still, and we just haven't had the pro season announcement yet, right?
Yeah, everyone's kind of waiting on that announcement. We did get an announcement today. I guess we could mention the new set got announced, Outsiders. I don't think we know much about it other than it's from the pits, and people are speculating that there are 4 heroes because I think that there's like 4 different like Dragon Shield sleeves releasing with it. So people are speculating that means 4 heroes.
Oh, that's how people got the 4 heroes from?
That's what I heard. And I think also the Blitz decks, I heard that there's like the box has like 4 different decks is what some people said. I don't know if that's true. It's just what I've heard.
Okay. From at least the splash art, it looks like a mech, maybe?
Yeah, it's possible. So I know that lore-wise, the pit... So Metrics is where Dash is from, and the pits is like the Undercity to Metrics. So Metrics is sort of... It's like the very classic trope of Metrics is sort of like the prosperous sci-fi, or like I guess in this case steampunk city, and then the pits is like the Undercity with all the mercenaries and assassins, and I think that's where Arachne's from. So I think we'll probably see an assassin. We could maybe see a mech.
You know what? I'm down for both mech and assassin cards. That would be pretty sweet.
Yeah, I think that would make a lot of sense. I kind of wonder if we're gonna see like maybe like Azalea. Azalea's from the pits. Do we get like a talented Azalea? Maybe, I don't know.
Wait, what? Azalea's from the pits? I thought she was in Crucible.
She's from Arcane Rising, but her hero...
Oh, sorry, Arcane Rising, yeah.
Yeah, her hero is from the pits. It's like her origin. Anyways, who knows? It'll be exciting when we get there.
Yeah, man, it's coming out on March 24th. That's like 3 months from now.
It's 3 months from now, but then there's like the pre-release before that. And also, I feel like because it's March 24th, I feel like, I don't know for sure, but the PT is probably going to be with a new set, which would be really, really sweet. Because if the ProQuest ends in like end of January, February, and then like pre-release, and if they're doing, I don't know if they're doing a world premiere, but if they're doing a world premiere, that'd be like probably like start of March. So it's kind of hard to imagine them like fitting it in February. I guess they could. It'd be very crammed. So I kind of think we're more going to see it in like April after the set's been out for a bit. And honestly, that seems great. It's like way better timing than kind of at the end of the set, which is where everything's fallen so far.
Yeah, I agree. I don't really want to play a stale format for the PT. I guess I'm not qualified yet, but hopefully I can qualify for it. Do you still have your PTIs?
I do. I have three. I think I have three.
Are you gonna use it for PT4? Is it PT4? PT3?
PT3, I guess.
Oh yeah, ProQuest 3. So PT3, yeah.
Probably. I mean, I hope to just qualify on via ProQuest, or maybe Elo. I think Elo is unlikely, but maybe.
I haven't checked my elo and since Worlds, so
I don't think it's
oh
updated.
oh, but it also probably doesn't queue you through elo, right?
Who knows?
Yeah, we don't know. We don't know. We need to.
Who knows?
It's gonna be like I'm gonna be I'm gonna be editing this podcast, and then the announcement's gonna come up on like Tuesday night or something, and then everything we're talking about here is like completely wrong.
That's okay. It happens.
Yeah. Okay, and let's move on to the main topic. So, do you want to start us off? What is a resource curve?
Right. So I guess we decided to name it Resource Curve because it's kind of analogous to other games like Magic the Gathering or Hearthstone or like Shadowverse, like a lot of these games that have resource or mana systems. You often want to build a curve. And in those games, that usually means like you have a bunch of early plays and a few later plays, so you can kind of play stuff on all of your turns as you ramp up your mana. Of course, Flesh and Blood doesn't have that. You just draw 4 cards and you pitch your cards. So it's a little bit different, but it's that same idea of trying to figure out how you're going to use all the cards in your hand as efficiently as possible and trying to make sure that you're utilizing the pitch that you generate from your cards as efficiently as possible. Because the better that you're able to utilize that pitch, usually the better the output on your turn is in terms of like damage dealt and damage blocked.
What's a good example of that? Or even better, just you want to give me an example of like a way you can what you're just explaining to me?
Yeah, so usually most decks want to operate off a single blue each turn. That's usually the most efficient. Blues are just the most efficient to pitch because they get 3 resources. Anytime you pitch a yellow or a red, it doesn't feel great. And the idea here is like if you think to Uprising Draft, you could think about the difference between Aether Hail and Ice Bolt. If you cast an Ice Bolt, it spends 2 of your pitch and you have an extra resource floating that you can't really use without pitching an entire extra card. So it's kind of like 2 cards, you deal 5 damage with a red. Aether Hail, on the other hand, costs 1 and does 4 damage, which allows you to activate Waning Moon, which comes in for 6. Or if it's a blue, you can do 2 and 3, so that's 5 versus Ice Bolt's 3. So by spending all of your resources, you're getting more efficient damage output out of your turn. And that kind of like directly ties into not only card evaluation, but also how you want to be building your deck.
When do you think like we should be thinking about the resource curve? Like at what point in the draft?
Yeah, so there's a couple answers to this. I think I'm usually thinking about my resource curve sometimes even before the draft. Like when I first look at a set, I'm often thinking about like what are the best hands that I can make, especially out of the commons and rares. So things like, hey, Waning Moon costs 2. I really want to utilize Waning Moon. That means 1 costs are going to be really good. So just like small ideas like that are really helpful. And then when you have those good hands in mind, you kind of know what to look for in the draft. And in the draft, it's a matter of kind of like assembling those pieces. If you know which individual parts you're looking for and which parts you already have, you can work on kind of like filling in whatever the blanks that you're missing are. And there's like a whole bunch of different ways that this can look depending on the hero and depending on your deck. And we'll kind of talk about some examples that we have and different ways that this gets implemented in different heroes. But that's kind of the basic idea.
Okay, so in limited, if I'm playing like an aggro deck, about how many blue cards am I looking for?
Yeah, so a really good kind of heuristic for you is if your deck is a typical aggro deck or most decks in Flesh and Blood, you kind of want 1 blue per hand. And if that's the case, you usually want about 8-ish blues. That ends up being about a quarter. Like if you have a 30 card deck, 8's about a quarter. So you're going to maximize your chances of drawing a single blue. For some other decks, though, if you're wanting to draw 2 or maybe even more blues per turn, like like Oldham or Icelander come to mind, you might want 20 plus. And there's like a few decks that kind of want two-ish blues per hand, and they might want like 15. Like I think Prism comes to mind, where you might want to do like an Iris. Like you can always use an extra blue to activate Iris, and then use your other blue to swing a Herald or something like that.
Okay, so if I'm getting this correct, you want like 8 blues if you want 8 blues in your deck total. If you want just 1 blue in your hand, so hopefully your other cards are red or yellow, that does more damage. If you're more maybe like a mid-range deck, you're looking at about 15 blues. So you have basically decks that want more access to resources and more ways to use resources. You want the 15 blues. And then I guess the control decks you want about 20 blues, just because you have a mana dump somewhere to put your mana.
Yeah, I think it really comes down to kind of like the cost of your cards and how efficiently you can use those extra resources. So, like Icelander, because she can arsenal her blues and they're really good from arsenal, then she can pitch a blue on her turn and a blue on her opponent's turn. Like she can use 3 blues really, really comfortably and it's no problem. Whereas if you think about a deck like FaB, it's hard to use more than a single blue most of the time. Like usually your single blue is pretty efficient, and if you're pitching a second blue, like maybe you're spending like one of it for an extra leg tap, but you're probably leaving a couple of resources floating, and your turn's probably not going to be fantastic.
I guess in Uprising, this is like pretty dominant because there's only 3 heroes, and I think each of the heroes only want like that that range of blues, right? Like I think FaB is looking for about 8 blues in the deck. Dromai, I think, is looking for like 15. Probably that might be too much, right, for Dromai?
I think Droma is probably also 8. Even though she is controlling, she doesn't typically have that many ways to use her pitch. Like often you're just like swinging an Ember Maw, or like even a lot of your hands will play out as Dunebreaker Cenopai or like a Sweeping Blows into like an Ember Maw Cenopai kind of thing. I can't think of that many hands that actually use like multiple blues.
Yeah, actually, you are right. Like, I think most hands in Dromai, like, even if you're just, like, casting a 3-cost dragon, that turn is pretty okay if you just go pitch a blue, play Necria, attack with Necria, pass.
Yeah, I think the other thing for Dromai is that she really is incentivized to have reds, because you need the red go again starters for her dragons, you need the red pitch to get ash sometimes, and there's lots of reasons that you want to have some extra reds in Dromai. So she's like a little bit of an interesting case.
Fair enough. Then, other than Prism, who do you think, like, wants about, like, 15, like, maybe, like, 10 plus blues?
I think that Prism really is kind of like obviously like the Guardians, Bravo, Oldham, and then like the Wizards, Icelander, maybe just Icelander, kind of are happy playing a ton. But in that middle range, I think it's mostly Prism, maybe Kano, because you don't want to have in Kano, you want to have enough threats going off the top of your deck that you have a way to push through damage. So I think Kano might be closer to like kind of the 2 blue hands, and that way you have more threat density. But I haven't drafted that much Kano in Arcane Rising, to be honest.
Okay, that seems fair. That seems fair. So I guess for like resource curve, it really depends on what hero you're trying to draft. Then.
Yeah, I think that your hero, everything about your hero and their card pool is going to kind of dictate the resource curve that you're trying to draft, which is like both the blues that you want as well as the combinations of cards you want to utilize those resources. So I think that's really dependent, on your hero ability. Do you have a built-in way to spend resources like Bravo does? What is your weapon like? Can you reliably spend blues on your weapon? Like think about like Prism can just dump blues into Iris so long as she has auras. Or are you a hero more like, I don't know, Briar, where you have this hyper efficient Rosetta Thorn that costs 1, and you're probably not going to be wanting to pitch more than 1 card most of the time because your cards are generally inexpensive and your weapon's also inexpensive.
Do you want to move on to the next point we have?
Sure. Do you want to introduce it, or do you want me to?
I'll introduce it. Okay, so then what about cards like, okay, this will be in CC, so cards like Fendel Spring Tunic, where it gets you an extra resource, does that change anything to your resource curve? So I guess this will be swaying away from limited right now.
Yeah, so usually if you know that your deck has ways to gain extra resources like Tunic and CC, you want to build in a way to get value out of that Tunic. If your deck only ever spends 3 efficiently, that Tunic resource can kind of be stranded there and just sit there. And I think we see a lot of examples of this, even in the current CC meta. Some of the examples I have is that like Oldham often he functions very well off of just kind of like one blue for Icy Hammer kind of thing, but he can also get value out of his Tunic using Command and Conquer or a Spinal Crush with Pummel, because those cost like 2 and 5 respectively. So you always have the one floating, and then you can kind of threaten the Pummel with the extra resource from the Tunic.
Yeah, they also Oldham also has Crown of Seeds, which uses the Tunic mana pretty efficiently as well.
Yeah, exactly. So lots of outlets for value out of that Tunic. Another one is Icelander. We kind of saw Michael Hamilton popularize the blue Brother in Arms as a Tunic outlet. You have the just as a way to get it to block 4, so you can get an extra block out of it. You have the Ironhide gloves kind of built in as well, and then you also have a couple of 2 cost. A lot of your stuff costs 1. Like you have like the Polar Blast and the Cold Snaps and the Aether Hails, but you have a couple of 2 costs, the efficient ones, which are Emeritus Scalding and Ice Bolt. And the nice thing about those is occasionally you can line it up with your Tunic and then also get the Waning Moon activation off them. For like with an Emeritus Scalding, that's like a 2 cards for 7 damage using your Tunic counter, which is super efficient for a blue. So Icelander has lots of ways built in to kind of get value out of that Tunic, but you do need to, when constructing that deck, you do need to kind of build in a way to get value out of it.
And then I guess we also have FaB. So FaB can also use Tunic counters, or I guess in his case, a lot of people use Blossom of Springs right now. And that's to play Belittle to get the blue into the hand, so then they can extend without having to initially pitch a card to go off. So with Art of War as well. So like typically FaB's most broken turns start with using the Tunic counter or activating Blossom of Springs, and then starting off with a Belittle of Art of War and then going from there, which is pretty insane. Those turns can get upwards of like 20 damage pretty easily. So how does this ever come up in limited?
I think it does, and the things to look for in limited are usually equipment that generate resources, and this usually comes in the chess piece. So the primary examples that come to mind, there's a few of them. The first one that comes to mind is Spellfire Cloak in Uprising Draft for Icelander. You can make a resource on your opponent's turn, so there's a little bit of a restriction there. You do need to have an outlet on your opponent's turn. You have a couple ways. There's Quell. You could put something like an Oasis Respite into your deck, or you could even play some of those 2 costs, just like in CC. You can play the Ice Bolt and then cash in your Spellfire Cloak. I would say that generally when I'm drafting my Icelander deck, I want not too many of those, because the Ice Bolt's not the most efficient card. Like Frosting and Aether Hail are more efficient, but having the option to having even just like 1 or 2 blue Ice Bolts so that I know I can cash that in at some point in the game is I think a significant power bump to your deck, because you're just going to get an extra damage compared to if it was an Aether Hail at some point. So I think just like going out of your way to try and get like 1 blue Ice Bolt or get an Oasis Respite so you can get value out of that Spellfire Cloak is actually pretty big.
Yeah, I love just finding the first Ice Bolt just to play it with the Spellfire Cloak. And it's actually really funny is whenever I don't have the Spellfire Cloak, I don't want to have an Ice Bolt in my deck, because it becomes really awkward to try and play a blue Ice Bolt.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's a good way to kind of think about like where your head should be when you're drafting is, do I have this type of equipment? Yes. Okay, it's a good piece of equipment, but I need to kind of maximize it to make sure I get that value. Otherwise, I might just have this extra resource I can't use. Right? If your Spellfire Cloak just sits there and you never use it, or you just quell 1 at some point in the game, like it's okay, but it's not really
You can do
doing
better.
as much as it could. Yeah. I have a question for you, Jay. In Uprising, there's also the Sash of Sandakai, which can generate a resource if you played a red for the Draconic Heroes. Are there are there particular like outlets or combinations of cards that you look for in Dromai or FaB for that piece of equipment, or
Typically for Sasha Sandakai, because those decks already generate off of like very little blues or very little resources in the first place, having access to a resource whenever you do brick or like not draw the blue is like probably the main place where I look to use Sasha Sandakai. So it's more of like a not an emergency break, but a get out of free jail. Get out of free jail? No, get out of jail free. Yeah, get out of jail free card where you just get bailed out, right? Like you have this hand of like four reds and it's like 2 0 cost and 1 cost, and I guess the third card really doesn't matter, but if you get to go 0 cost, 0 cost, 1 cost, and then get a Phoenix Flame attack with the Phoenix Flame, it's just like that hand could have been way worse if you didn't have that Sasha Sandakai, and I think that's why that card's so important there.
yeah, I kind of agree. I think that's sort of been my approach with Sash as well. I was just curious because I didn't know if maybe you had a different one.
No, I don't think Sash actually enables any like broken card. Oh, actually, there was this one time that I did like really rely on Sasha Sandakai, and it was actually at Worlds. I was having this like really bad draft, and on pack 3 in like the not the end but in the middle of it, I got past the tome. What is that tome called?
Tome of Firebrand.
Tome of Firebrand. Yeah, I got past the Tome of Firebrand, and I knew I already had the Sasha Sandakai, and basically I was like, I think in some of my matchups I actually need this, like a way to go over the top, and I picked the tome because I knew I had Sasha Sandakai, so then I can actually really pop off on the turns I really need to. And then on my first round I actually got that exact scenario off, and that felt really good, where in the draft process I like actively thought that this is going to be the line, so I purposely didn't activate my Sash on a turn I could have to find the Firebrand and go off on the turn with the Firebrand.
Yeah, I think that's a great example, and really cool when that kind of pays off, and just being kind of cognizant of like Tome of Firebrand is a hard card to play because you need to get to Chainlink 4, and often that's hard to do without spending more than 2 resources. Like you usually need all 3 resources to get to Chainlink 4.
You need you need 3 resources to get the Chainlink 4, and then you need another resource to play the Tome. So you actually need 4 resources, and the only way you can get 4 resources is if you have Sasha Sandakai.
And it definitely is possible. Like you could play all zeros and an Emberblade, and yeah, that's possible, but it's not necessarily the easiest to line up. So just having that redundancy or that kind of that backup is really, really nice.
Is there any other cards in Limited that would that fits into this concept?
Yeah, I think the other main one that applies is Hardened Cross Trap in Welcome to Wraith. I think a lot of people have drafted that set. So this is the reduce. You break it and you reduce the cost of your next attack by 2. Similarly, there's a Vest of the First Fist in Arcane Rising, which does like a similar thing. On hit, you can break it to gain 2 resources. So that's like all kind of a card we can talk about after. But I think those are kind of like the 2 other examples that come to mind. So with Hardened Crosstrap specifically, I think there's some really cool stuff you can do. Like one of the most obvious ones for Bravo is like Disable is a very good card in Bravo anyways, just comes in for 9. The red one comes in for 9 and threatens their arsenal if you crush. And it costs 5. But with Hardened Crossstrap, I've had decks where I have a red Disable and I go, I'm not using this Crossstrap if I can avoid it, because at some point in the game, I'm just going to pitch a blue, break my Crossstrap, and come in for 9 with this Disable. And that's going to be like just a really powerful way to swing the game or the tempo back to me. And it's very, very powerful and like a very, very easy way to use it.
That seems fair.
Another way that you can use this is to enable pummels. This could work in Bravo. So sometimes you can do like a Crush Confidence being reduced by 2, and then you have the 2 floating for a pummel. It's pretty face up, but you can often pick spots where your opponent can't really play around it. And in fact, a lot of heroes can utilize this kind of play pattern. I do this in Katsu as well. I often like having some of the big attacks. So you can just do like a Raging Onslaught or a Wounded Bull with pummel backup. And if they overblock to to respect the pummel, you just kind of get to arsenal the pummel for free, and then you took their whole hand, and it's still fine for you. So that's a pattern I enjoy a lot. Another really good one is sometimes just Kodachi into like a Wounded Bull or a Raging Onslaught is just 2 cards for 9 to 10 damage out of nowhere. If you have Goliath Gauntlet, you can push it up to like 11 or 12 damage, which is just pretty absurd. So if you're playing like a more defensive Katsu deck, that's like a great way that you can utilize the extra resources. I guess another favorite way for me using this is with Surging Strike. You can just break Cross Trap, play Surging Strike, and then it's really easy to pummel the Surging Strike, which means you can go and tutor your what is that card? Whelming Gustwave for free, because it's pretty hard for them to play around the pummeled Surging Strike. So yeah, I guess the big takeaway here is just if you are lucky enough to get these equipment that can generate resources on demand in your draft, you really want to find a way to not just have them in your deck, but think about certain cards or think about certain hands that can really maximize that card. And I think you actively want to play into those hands and set them up, because there's often some of the most powerful things you can do in a draft environment.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. I think one more thing I just want to add is in Arcane Rising, as you mentioned, Vest of the Cross Strap? No, that's not the name.
Vest of the First Fist.
Vest of the First Fist. What's Cross Strap? That's the WTR card. Yes. Vest of the First Fist that generates 2. I actually like Vest in Kano a lot too, just because you get to play an attack. My favorite combo is with Sun's Kiss? Sun's Kiss and Moon's Wish, yes. You can actually threaten red Moon's Kiss to your opponent, and if the Moon's Wish hits, you can actually add a blue Sun Kiss to your hand with Kano and generate 2 more resources with the Vest, and try and pop off from there, which basically forces your opponent to respect Moon's Wish the whole game. And it's like a good way to like include attacks into Kano if the traditional Kano deck is not open for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've also found it pretty good in Dash. Dash just has a lot of the kind of like 2-cost boost cards. Usually 1 and 0, like Zipper Hit and 0 to 60 are kind of the better boost cards. But if you do have the Vest of the First Fist, you can like pick up a couple of extra 2s because you can usually use them. So very solid card. Do you have anything to add, or can I change?
No, we can move on.
So one thing I do want to mention is I think that there's a big distinction between the cards that we just mentioned. So Spellfire Cloak, Hardened Crossstrap, Vest of the First Fist, and Tunic, I guess, if you're lucky enough to draft that, where these cards are actively generating resources. This is very, very different, I think, than something like Deep Blue in Tales of Aria. Deep Blue is the one where you can break it to bottom a card and you get 3 resources as an action, and then it has go again. For me, the big distinction there is that you're still only getting 3 pitch out of 1 card, which is like you had a blue in your hand. So you're not getting any extra, and it doesn't change the math on your turn, and it doesn't change the math on how you're spending your pitch. It's just, I guess, like hand smoothing. So if you draw a hand where you're short a blue, you can turn one of your other cards into a blue and kind of solve your problems that way. So it's a very, very powerful card, and it's very good. And I think it's first pick worthy, but you don't really need to modify the way that you're drafting or play towards using it. It's just kind of a card that you have as backup.
Actually, I don't know if I agree. I would definitely change my deck a little bit if I have Deep Blue, and if I don't. Like if I was like a Briar deck an aggressive Briar deck that wanted like, let's say 8 blues in my deck, if I have Deep Blue, I would be looking to try and get more reds more aggressively, to even try and play like 6 blues, just because I know that I'm going to get bailed out on a turn. Like I can reliably use my Deep Blue. I don't need to draw a blue every single turn. So then I try to lower my blue count just a little bit. And so with all the other decks.
Yeah, that's a good point. I suppose I do that as well. But so I agree with you. I do the same thing. I guess what I was thinking of was that
it doesn't make an explosive turn.
It doesn't make an explosive turn, and it's not like like the Icelander example, where if you have the Spellfire Cloak, you really want to have an Ice Bolt in your deck so that you can utilize it. Whereas
Mhm.
if you don't, then you don't want that Ice Bolt. I don't think that Deep Blue changes the math because it's still just one card for 3. So like it
Yeah.
functions the same as normal. You can just maybe, yeah, I agree. You can cut a blue.
Yeah, I think you get to cut a blue. Just during the draft, just get to be more aggressive and be like, I want this red. I want this red. I want this red as well. And then, you don't get into this situation where like, oh no, I only have 4 blues in my deck. Typically doesn't happen, but you know, sometimes if you're not thinking, you're not conscious about what cards you're picking, you could end up with a deck with like a very mediocre curve. I guess it does happen the other way around more often in limited, where because a lot of the people end up taking all the reds, because reds are just generally more powerful. A lot of people end up with like too many blues or like too many yellows, or yellows is an awkward. What do you think about yellow cards, Yuki? Like, is it like a necessary evil or?
I'm not sure what I think about them from a design perspective. I think that it kind of depends. Yellows usually just aren't the most efficient because when you pitch them, you're kind of only getting like 2/3 of a card's worth of value because you could have pitched a blue in theory. And when you play them, it's also like you're losing a point of value compared to a red. So no matter what, you're always like losing value somewhere on the yellow. I guess the upside is that it does give you some consistency, or is like kind of like a hedge where it kind of does both. And I think that there are decks that want yellows, but they are, I think you need a good reason to actively want yellows in your deck. And or like maybe it's just a really, really good card. Like if it's like an Aether Ice Vein, you're probably happy to play a yellow one just because it's a strong
It's
enough
too
card.
good.
But even then, like the red's better. I think the big places where people actually want yellows, like the most obvious one was Prism with Luminaris, was very incentivized to play yellows because of the text of Luminaris wanting a yellow pitch to give all your stuff go again. Um, but even stuff um,
Wartune
like
Herald.
Reinhardt, I
Oh,
was thinking like
Reinhardt.
Reinhardt and Levia to some degree as well, often end up drafting yellows because you care about the 6 power. And there are a couple blues with 6 power, and those are the premium ones. But also, both of those decks function pretty good off of 2 pitch a lot of the time, especially Reiner. Like a lot of his attacks cost 2, his club cost 2. So you can kind of like play that deck with yellows as your resource card for the most part and maybe just have a few blues. Um, Bolton's kind of similar. Like Bolton, a lot of his stuff costs 1 and 0, and it's not that easy to use blues. And the blues are pretty bad also. So I think Bolton can kind of get away with playing a few extra yellows compared to a traditional hero. But I agree with you. For the most part, yellows are
Bad.
not the most desirable, let's say.
You don't want to say bad?
They're usually suboptimal.
Okay. I will force it out of you.
I guess the other place that I've used yellows is I don't mind. I kind of like yellow ice cards in Icelander, um, because you can fuse an Aether Ice Vein and still pitch it to Waning Moon. So if you ideally you just want a blue to fuse because then you can arsenal it or pitch it. But if the draft is kind of thin, you can fuse a yellow, and like because the reds just don't make very good fuse cards because then you have to arsenal a red and your opponent knows you have a red and it's like kind of awkward. Whereas the yellow you can just pitch it, which is kind of nice. So I guess it's another spot I've liked it, but again, it's sort of like I'd rather have a blue. So
Okay, that seems, yeah, that makes sense. Makes sense. Yuki likes defending her yellows.
whoa, let's not get carried away here. I didn't say that I love them. I just think that there's spots where they can be okay, but usually most decks, I think if your deck is pretty much entirely red and blue, you'd probably be happier than if you had a mix of yellows in there. It's just that you don't always get the choice in draft.
Yeah, it's called limited because you're limited on your pool. Okay, let's move on. How can we draft with the resource curve in mind?
Yeah, so I think there's a few ways. We talked about some of them a little bit, but just to kind of summarize, I think on your turn, when you're planning out your turns, you're trying to maximize your resources and make sure that you are spending all of your resources. For most decks, this means building around how am I going to use 3 resources as efficiently as possible, and what are the most efficient 4 or 5 card hands that you can build that utilize those 3 resources. And kind of doing like a little bit of pre-planning or thinking about the set beforehand, so you kind of have like those hands in mind, is a great place to start. Once you kind of know what you're looking for, you can think about what kind of cards do you actually have in your draft deck, and what do you need to kind of complete that formula. You can kind of think of there's like a magic podcast I listen to, and they say that drafting is kind of like cooking with a recipe. You're like following this recipe, and that's like your end draft deck. And I think it's like very true. You're kind of like have this recipe of like what you want your deck to look like and what you want your optimal turns to look like. And if you know what that looks like, you can just kind of piece everything together. So we kind of talked about like some of this in Uprising to give you specifics, but I think that this is something that applies to all draft formats, and especially early on in a format when you're trying to figure it out. If you can think about what cards do I want, what cards work well in combination, and use my resources efficiently, you'll probably be on a good track to be drafting a strong deck.
That example, is it from Lords? Lords Unlimited?
Yeah, Lords of Limited.
Okay. I was thinking for like a good 2 minutes on like which Magic podcast was that, and it was Lords. Okay, Lords Unlimited is a very good podcast, by the way. If any of you guys play Magic the Gathering, that's a good podcast to listen to. Anything else you want to talk about for the resource curve?
I feel like I wanted to talk a little bit more about some of the examples that we had, but I don't know if it like fits in right now.
Oh, I see.
Because we kind of were like talking about it and then we kind of moved past. So I don't know if like what the best way to integrate some of that is.
Then
I think like, so I think specifically I can bolt them. I kind of want to talk about like Briar, because I feel like there's like different Briar decks based on like, I feel like these are like all different Briar decks that want different things, and like you don't want to mix those up kind of thing.
I see.
And I think it's kind of like unique to Briar, because I don't think like Uprising really has that. Like a lot of the plays are like pretty fixed.
Yeah, because all the cards are so similar.
Yeah. And maybe a little bit. I think Toa is like really interesting. I was thinking also this like particularly like why Thump is bad in Toa. I think there's like,
Well, I love Thump. I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know what you're talking about. Thump is like so good.
not bad, but
What?
tricky to enable outside of.
Really? I actively only want Red Thump, and I want like none of the other cards.
But how many do you want?
How many Red Thump? I want like at least 3. I think if I can get 3 Red Thumps, I'll be pretty happy, because like how I play Thump is there are 3 block until I can activate it, or I have a spot where I want to activate it. So then I want them on first cycle.
So I agree, but I guess I found Thump kind of awkward in Toa just because. Should
No,
we can we use this the way that it is, or
yeah, we can just use this as the way it is. Yeah, we can just talk about it. Okay, like we can. Okay, yeah, we're just gonna use this. I'll edit it a little bit and then make it a little smoother. But you wanna just go into Briar and how Briar has different Briar decks?
well, let's finish Thump first,
Okay.
or do you want to loop back to Thump?
No. Let's finish Thump first. Okay, let's finish
Okay,
Thump first. All right.
okay, we can
Thump.
edit all of our like turtling out.
Yeah. I don't know. Listeners who's in this far, they'll listen to whatever.
All right. Anyways, so with Thump, I find I tend to prefer a card like Snow Under, because it's just a 3 for 7 and you can play it off one card.
Hmm.
And the biggest way I want to use Thump is if I have, what is the glove? The Cracker Jacks?
Cracker Jacks, yes. I would
Yeah,
never play. Okay, yeah. Okay, yes, I agree with you. I would never play Thump without Cracker Jacks.
right. So, and I think the reason that Thump is really awkward is like there's like a couple reasons for it in the set. The first one, a big one, is that it's not elemental. So none of the weave cards work with it. So there's
Nope.
limited ways to pump it. It costing 4 is really awkward because like Icequake does pump it, but then it's like always like it's okay. Like because you get the discard, it's not bad. But like even like the red ice quake, like you still have one floating, is not the most efficient. And so like in terms of cards, the most efficient card to pump this is exactly Earthlore Surge. But Earthlore Surge doesn't really work with most of what you want your curve to do. It makes you want to hold on to these like really, really big hands, and it doesn't block for 3. So I think there's like a lot of reasons why Earthlore Surge is like a little bit awkward, and it's hard to really have like maybe you can get like a Thump Earthlore Surge deck, but then you also need to draw 2 blues of it. So it just feels like it asks a lot of your deck, and there's like some inconsistency there of needing 2 blues plus those 2 cards in combination. And when you draw either the Thump or the Earthlore Surge, it's kind of bad. And you also need to get those cards in the draft as well. So there's like a lot of moving pieces.
Oh, okay, okay. I understand where you're coming from, but the way that I draft Oldhim is my game plan is to block for 9, swing hammer for 4. Like basically every single turn. And when I'm doing that, I just don't use my arsenal. So like in obviously unless you have the legendary piece, then there's a completely different deck. But Oldhim has a hard time using the arsenal, I think. And when I so basically the card that I end up arsenaling is cards like Earthlore Surge, where it can extend my where I can really extend my turn if I really want to, or a card like Red Thump, where if I once I do find that Earthlore Surge, then I can take some damage and come back with the Thump Earthlore Surge, right? And that's why I like Thump a lot in this format, where I end up just like blocking everything out, finding Thump, arsenaling it, block everything out, find Earthlore Surge, play Earthlore Surge, play Thump, and then keep on blocking. Like just put that pressure to basically deck my opponent. And I think that's why I just like Thump so much in that format, where I'm like actively not using the arsenal in Oldhim, and because I'm not drafting, let's say, Snow Under Reds, like I'm just not drafting that card at all unless I have to, and I'm just not putting pressure on my opponent in that way, and I'm like putting more pressure to my opponent's deck, so like trying to deck them more, and like I play Red Rejuvenate more often than you do probably.
Okay, that's fair enough. Yeah, maybe we have a little bit different play styles. I usually lean more into the Snow Under and just kind of like play kind of like raw value. Like I'll often just like block hammer, block hammer. If I have an extra card, I'll arsenal the Snow Under, and then I'll be like 7. This is like kind of similar but different cards that we like.
Mhm.
But kind of tying back into our main topic and what you were talking about with still like note that the best enabler for that is either your equipment because you have it on hand, or Earthlore Surge because 4+2 is 6, and that's 2 blues, and that's just the most efficient way. Icequake does work with it in a pinch, but
Ah, all right, Icequake if bad in Oldhim. That's a Lexi card.
exactly right, and it's because you can't really use that one resource very well. Like most of your stuff costs 3, a couple cards cost 4, and you kind of like always have these extra resources floating. So even if you, what is Thump Space Power? Is it 6, 7?
Oh, I think blue one attacks for 4, so yeah, I'm assuming the red one's 6. I can double check this. No, FaB TCG is too slow. Yeah, but I think it is 6.
Yeah, Thump is 6 power as a base in
Okay.
red. So even if you do pair this with your Icequake, it's like, yeah, you get the 9 and a discard, but you pitch 2 cards and the Thump and the Icequake, so that's 4 cards to do like 9 and a discard, and they get to choose. So you're like, I guess you're technically on right, but it's not exciting. Whereas when you do that Earthsnare Surge and you get up to 11, it's just so much more efficient. And that's kind of that
Yes.
idea of like spending all your resources and building your deck to spend all the resources that are available to you.
Yeah, yeah. And you said earlier you want to talk about a little bit about Briar?
Yeah, I think Briar is a really interesting example that I don't know. I can't think of another deck that functions exactly like this, but I feel like Briar kind of has very distinct builds that are wanting to build their curve in different ways. So we were talking about Earthlore Surge, and Earthlore Surge is still a really good card in Briar, but if you're wanting to put that card into your deck, I feel like, especially if you have multiples, um, you're kind of wanting to build your deck in a way where you have zero cost non attacks to go with it. So, like Bramble Spark, Weave Earth, Weave Lightning are really good. And then zero cost attacks like Arcanic Crackle. So, you can go something like Bramble Spark, Earthlore Surge, you get your embodiment of lightning, you play Arcanic Crackle, that comes in for what is that? You get
11. 11 for if it's all red.
11, yeah. And then you get the Arcane as well, right? And then you
Yeah, the
also get
2
the
arcane,
Rosetta
yeah.
Thorn for 2 and 2. So that's like a really efficient turn. And I think that's different from the other Earthbriar deck that maybe doesn't play so many Earthlore Surges and plays more of the 2 cost attacks like Rites of Replenishment or what's the other one? Stir the Wildwood, or even
Burgeoning.
yeah, Burgeoning. Even the generic one is not bad. Entwine Earth.
Entwine Earth, yes.
Yeah, so like any of those, and in that one, because you're playing the 2 cost attacks that come in for more, you're really incentivized to have cards like Bramble Spark, Weave Earth, Weave Lightning, all the 0 cost non attacks, because again, you can go 0 cost into the 6 attack, and then do your Rosetta Thorn. And interestingly, these both work out to be, I think, almost the same damage, if not exactly the same. And it doesn't really matter which one you're doing, but you should be aware of which one you're doing. And what you don't want to do is you don't want to pair a whole bunch of Earthlore Surges with a whole bunch of 2 cost attacks, because then you need kind of 4 pitch and maybe Rosetta Thorn, and in your aggro deck that starts to get really, really clunky. So you kind of want to know like which Earthbriar deck you are and construct your curve accordingly.
Yeah, I think the key takeaway would be just make sure you know how much resources your good turns are going to be. And the closer it is, or you want to make that number to 3 if possible. And unless you have something like a tunic where you have the extra resource time to time, that's the only time you can actually make it to like a 4 resource turn essentially. Is that a right term? 4 resource turn? 3 resource turn?
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And I think you see this play out. Like if you pick up a classic constructed deck next time that you sit down and play classic constructed, just pay attention to the way that your turns play out and the way that you spend resources. And I think that you'll find that CC decks kind of have this built in, especially if you're kind of like just net decking or playing like a tournament list. You'll notice a lot of these have these ideas already ingrained to sort of maximize their efficiency.
Yeah, the tricky part about limited is that you have to do this on the fly while looking at the pack and evaluating which cards you want, which is the added difficulty in limited, which makes me like the format so much more, right? Because this is a puzzle that you have to solve every time you open a pack.
Yeah. And if you're doing this and your opponent isn't, I think it actually gets you a really, really big edge. Because if let's say they're spending 2 resources instead of 3, and that costs them a damage, well, a lot of games of limited come down to 1, 2, 3 health. So if you're doing this multiple turns in a row, just getting an extra 1 to 2 damage out of your turn because you've built your resource curve just a little bit better than them and to be a little bit more consistent, um, you're just going to really get an edge over time the longer the game goes.
Okay, is there anything else you want to talk about?
Yeah, I guess maybe the very, very final point before we wrap up here is I think there is something to be said about consistency and trying to make sure that your cards line up as often as possible. So, one example is if you think about Dash, she often has like 2 costs and 1 cost. So you can kind of go like a throttle into a zipper hit, and that's very efficient. But if you're trying to constantly line up these 2 costs and 1 costs, you have these hands where you get like 2 1 costs or you get 2 2 costs, and it's a little bit inconsistent. So for that reason, you're often happier kind of drafting more of the low cost the low cost cards so that you can kind of like always have a functional turn. You really don't want to get those 4 resource turns. You want to like you'd rather have a 2 resource turn than a 4 resource turn because that fourth resource requires a whole extra card, and especially in something like dash, like you have the outlet of your weapon. But just in general, like it's like the same premise as FaB, right? Why the 3 for 0s are more popular than the 4 for 1s, outside of Mounting Anger, just because if you're pairing it with the Ember Blade, you can only swing 1 4 for 1 and an Ember Blade, whereas you can swing as many 3 for 0s as you want. And so usually just building your curve to be like use those 3 resources, but not be like too tight or too taxed on that resource is also like something, a small thing to consider.
Okay, I think that wraps it up for the resource curve talk.
All right, that's going to wrap us up for this week. Thank you all for listening. If you enjoyed the show, please let us know on YouTube. We'd love to hear from you. And if you think that there's anything that we missed, if you have another, as Jay mentioned, if you have another term for resource curve, or if there's any kind of like fine details that you want to talk about, we'd love to hear from you down in the comments on YouTube. You can also reach out to us on Twitter. You can find me at Yukili Bender, and you can find Jay at Ueda J. That's on Twitter. And then you can also email us at onthebauble@gmail.com. So if you ever have questions, feedback, comments, feel free to shout out to us and reach us through any of those avenues.
Sign off? I have nothing FaB related. I can talk about my weekend and how I almost play Magic the Gathering. Is that good?
You could talk about anime.
Oh, you want me to talk about anime instead? Yeah, we can talk about anime because you ended up watching King's Game, right? Or Osama Ranking? Oh no, it's King's Ranking.
Yeah, I've been watching it. So Jay, I asked Jay for anime recommendations last week, was it?
Yeah, it was last week. I think after the episode.
Yeah, and Jay recommended to me an anime called Osama Ranking, or
Ranking of Kings in English, yeah.
yeah, which is a pretty cool show. I think it came out like 1 or 2 years ago. Do you want to give them kind of like a synopsis or like a premise of the show?
Let me actually just find the premise of the show because I don't want to butcher it. Okay, there it is. There it is. It came out in 2021 October, so that's like that's exactly a year ago now. So I guess I just read the synopsis. It's gonna be better than whatever I can say. So, Ranking of Kings is synopsis is unable to hear, speak, or wield a sword. Prince Boji doesn't seem like a typical heir to the throne, and his kingdom agrees. But his fateful encounter with Kage, a shadow on the ground, gives him his first true friend. The two set off on a grand adventure and together form a bond that can overcome any obstacle, even being king. So, this story is basically about the main character is, what is that word? Deaf?
Yeah,
He can't hear. Yeah.
he's deaf and mute, and he's like a kid. He's like a little kid that cries when he gets upset and just is like pretty carefree. Like he's just like a small child, basically, is how he
Yeah.
behaves.
Yeah, but then he is technically a heir to the throne, so people have high expectations for him, or people had high expectations for him. And then he basically didn't grow up to meet those expectations for, a couple of reasons, mainly him not being able to hear. But throughout the show, you learn more about him and how talented he actually is. And this show is really good at just like really showing like how much he can grow and how much he can actually do. And like it was like if you like any kind of fantasy, I think I would definitely recommend this show. This is a really good watch for any age. um yeah, like even if you're a kid, I think you'll enjoy it. If you're an adult, you'll enjoy it. You can watch it with your family. It's just a good show.
Yeah, I think I agree with all of that. It's a little slow to get going, but the characters are well done, and it's kind of like, I think even if you're not a huge anime fan necessarily, I might try it out, because it's kind of, I feel like it doesn't follow a lot of like the anime stereotypes, and there's like a lot of things about it that's just kind of like unusual and stands out in like all the best ways. It's just like pretty lighthearted, but also touches on some, I guess, like important or relatable or deep topics as well in an interesting way, and it just kind of it ties it all together really nicely, I thought.
Yeah, yeah. How far are you? Are you like episode 20? Couple episodes left?
Something like that. Yeah, I think 18 or 19, somewhere around there.
Oh, okay. So almost the end.
Almost the end. I believe it's 23 episodes long for anybody curious about it. But yeah, you should definitely go check it out. I
Yeah.
think it's on Crunchyroll,
Yeah, I think it's on
probably.
Crunchyroll. You can find it online through various illegal websites, if you want to call it that. Okay, I think that's about it. If you have any other, like I've watched basically every single show. Maybe we can introduce some other shows some other time.
We can definitely do that. And if you have any shows that you want to recommend to us that you think that we should watch or talk about, let us know. We'd always. I'm sure that Jay's probably already watched it, but I would be curious to know. And who knows, maybe you'll surprise Jay. It's a
Yeah,
challenge.
maybe. I don't typically watch like non-anime stuff, so if you have any like, what are those called? Live action? Is that what people call them?
Yeah.
Yeah, live action. So like one of my friends just said I should watch what is it, Wednesday, that came out on Netflix recently.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know that show.
Yeah.
I don't watch that much television, but when I do, it's usually anime, sometimes live action. Depends.
Hmm. Anything good, you know. I don't. As long as the show is good, I'll watch it. Actually, that's not even true. Even if the show's bad, I'll probably watch it. So yeah, recommend us anything. Recommend me anything. I'll watch it.
It's true. Jay is quite indiscerning with his tastes.
Okay. I think we can wrap it up there.
Yeah, I think that's a good ending spot.
All right. Good night, everyone.